The headline blared from a newspaper, a garish neon sign in the rain-slicked alley where Elias found refuge. He clutched the cheap damn pages, the ink bleeding into gray fabric of his worn coat. The name, the details, a chilling confirmation of his worst fears. The powerful figure, Silas Vane, the man who had built his empire on ruthlessness and who had treated Elias like vermin, was dead, and the mistress, the woman Elias had secretly loved from afar, was the prime suspect. A knot of dread tightened in his chest. He knew her, knew the desperation that had driven her into Silas's orbit. This wasn't justice. It was a tragedy waiting to happen. A brilliant mind trapped in a body that betrayed him with a limp, the result of an accident Silas had conveniently forgotten causing. Silas, the ruthless tycoon, had taken Elias under his wing, only to systematically strip away his confidence, his opportunities, his very sense of self-worth. He was a pawn in Silas's grand game, a source of amusement, a reminder of his own perceived superiority. Silas had manipulated everything, even Elias's love life. He had driven a wedge between Elias and the woman he loved, forcing her into a loveless affair with him, using her as a pawn in his twisted game. Elias had been powerless, his voice silenced, his dreams crushed under the weight of Silas's influence. For years, Elias had observed, learned, and planned in secret. He explored the vulnerabilities in Silas's empire, the cracks in his armor. He developed a network of allies, people Silas had overlooked or mistreated, people who owed him a debt. He gathered evidence, not of Silas's crimes, but of his character, the pattern of abuse, the manipulation, the cruelty. The police, led by a relentless detective who had always been suspicious of Silas, arrived at his mansion. They found him dead, the mistress nowhere to be seen. Elias, standing among the crowd of onlookers, felt a surge of adrenaline. He saw the detective's eyes scan the room, searching for something, someone, and then Elias stepped forward. He didn't confess. He revealed the truth, not as a witness, but as a catalyst. He spoke of Silas's manipulation, of the mistress's desperation, of the web of deceit that had ensnared them all. As a detective, armed with Elias's revelations and his own suspicions, began to unravel the truth. The evidence pointed away from the mistress and toward the more complex, sinister plot. Silas's empire began to crumble, his secrets exposed, his victims coming forward. Elias, once a pawn, now held the key to unlocking the truth. Silas's empire was in ruins, his name tarnished, his victims beginning to heal. The mistress, though still in custody, was no longer the sole suspect. Elias, standing in the rain, felt a strange sense of peace. He had done what he could, spoken the truth, and now it was up to the system to deliver justice. The weight of the detective's words hung in the damp air, heavy as the rain that had now begun to fall in earnest. Elias shivered, not from the cold, but from a sudden, icy dread that seeped into his bones. He had thought the storm was over, that the crushing weight of Silas Vane's influence had finally been lifted. But the detective's cryptic warning suggested the worst was yet to come. The new threat remained unnamed, undefined, a shadow lurking in periphery of the investigation. The detective, his name Detective Harris, had seen it all before. The fall of empires, the rise of underdogs, the twisted paths of justice. But this case, this web of manipulation and deceit spun by Silas, now seemed to have another thread, another player waiting in the wings. The challenge now was to uncover this new threat, to understand its connection to Silas and the events that had led to his death. Elias, once again feeling the familiar sting of powerlessness, knew he had to act. He couldn't afford to be a passive observer this time. He had to dig deeper, to find the truth before it found him. Elias delved back into the labyrinth of Silas's life, revisiting the evidence, the conversations, the interactions. He spoke to the mistress again, this time not as an observer, but as an ally. Her fear was palpable, her trust in Elias fragile. She spoke of a figure in the shadows, someone who had been watching, someone who had known too much, someone who had benefited from Silas's death. The climax began to take shape during a clandestine meeting at an abandoned warehouse, a place Silas had used for his clandestine dealings. Elias, the mistress, and Detective Harris were present, armed with fragmented information and a growing sense of dread. They discussed the possibilities, the suspects, the motives. Suddenly, the warehouse lights flickered, and a figure emerged from the darkness. It was not who they expected. It was someone closer, someone they had trusted, as the unexpected figure revealed their true motives. They were not just an observer. They were an accomplice, someone who had been manipulating events from the shadows, using Silas and the mistress as pawns in their own game. Their goal was not just to bring down Silas, but to seize control of his empire, to inherit his legacy of ruthlessness. The person they had trusted was now the primary suspect. Their motives unclear, their actions unpredictable. Elias felt a wave of nausea, the ground shifting beneath his feet. The journey to justice was not just fraught with challenges. It was a treacherous path filled with hidden enemies and unexpected allies. The figure's words echoed in the oppressive silence of the warehouse, each syllable a hammer blow against Elias's already frayed nerves. The air grew thick with the scent of oil and decay, mirroring the rot that seemed to permeate everything connected to Silas Vane's legacy. Trust, that fragile thing Elias had clung to like a lifeline, lay shattered at his feet, betrayed by the smiling face of someone he believed an ally. The challenge now was more daunting than ever. Not only did Elias have to expose his hidden figure, this master manipulator who had played everyone like puppets on a string, but he had to do it while navigating a landscape riddled with suspicion and deceit. The mistress, once a source of comfort in shared struggle, now viewed Elias with wary eyes, her trust fractured. Detective Harris, though resolute, was hampered by the new complexity of the case, the shifting allegiances, the lack of concrete evidence. Elias felt utterly alone, the weight of the world pressing down on him, the ghosts of Silas's cruelty whispering in his ear. Elias retreated, not into despair, but into a cold, analytical resolve. He needed information, proof. He needed to understand the figure's motives, their connection to Silas, their endgame. He spent days poring over old files, revisiting conversations, searching for patterns, for inconsistencies. He sought out forgotten allies, individuals Silas had wronged but who had managed to stay hidden, hoping for redemption or revenge. He pieced together fragments of information, whispers in the shadows, half-formed theories. The climax unfolded during a tense stakeout at an old, abandoned factory, a place rumored to be one of Silas's hidden strongholds, a place the mysterious figure had been seen frequenting. Elias, Detective Harris, and a wary, hesitant mistress watched from a distance, their breath visible in the cold night air. They waited, anticipating a meeting, a transaction, a reveal. The tension was palpable, the silence broken only by the distant hum of the city and the rhythmic sound of their own hearts pounding. Suddenly, lights flickered on inside the factory, casting long, distorted shadows against the decaying brick walls. A car pulled up, its headlights cutting through the gloom. The hidden figure emerged, flanked by two imposing men. Elias recognized them. Silas's most feared enforcers, men thought to have vanished after Silas's death. The figure spoke, their voice cold and detached, arranging something, planning something. Elias, hidden but watching, felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the moment of truth. Elias made his move, not with brute force, but with calculated risk. He used a hidden microphone to relay the conversation to Detective Harris, who moved in with backup. A confrontation ensued, not just with the figure, but with Elias's own past, his own fear, his own sense of inadequacy. The figure, realizing they were exposed, turned their full attention to Elias, a look of pure hatred in their eyes. "You," they spat, "you ruined everything. You exposed me. I should have known better than to trust you, just like Silas." And as the police closed in, as the figure was apprehended, as justice finally seemed to be served, Elias looked into their eyes and saw not just malice, but a reflection of his own struggle, his own desire for revenge. The figure grinned, a final, chilling smile. "You think this is over? Silas is dead, but his legacy lives on. And I am his legacy. Silas is dead, but his legacy lives on. And I am his legacy." What did it mean? Was the figure suggesting They were more than just an accomplice, more than just a power-hungry manipulator. Were they something else entirely? Something born from Silas's cruelty, nurtured in the darkness of his empire? Elias felt a cold dread creep up his spine. Elias, now working closely with Detective Harris, delved into the darkest corners of Silas's past. They unearthed not just financial records and criminal connections, but disturbing psychological profiles, account of Silas's obsession with control, his twisted experiments in manipulation, his desire to create something perfect, something that would carry on his name, his methods, his ruthlessness. They discovered evidence of secret projects, hidden facilities, and most disturbingly, records of psychological conditioning. The climax reached its peak during a raid on one of Silas's most closely guarded secrets, a hidden laboratory buried deep beneath one of his corporate buildings. Inside, they found not just evidence of Silas's past crimes, but chilling continuation of his work. The figure they had arrested was not the end, but the beginning. There were others, followers, disciples of Silas's dark philosophy, people who had been groomed and conditioned to carry on his legacy. They saw the results of Silas's twisted experiments, individuals broken and remade in his image, loyal only to his memory, his methods. The movement towards the climax was a terrifying realization that Silas's influence was far-reaching and enduring, that his legacy was not just a person, but a movement, a cult of personality built on cruelty and control. Silas Vane was not just a ruthless tycoon. He was a twisted architect of control, a man who had built an empire not just of wealth, but of psychological manipulation, leaving behind a legacy of broken people and dangerous followers. How do you fight an ideology? How do you dismantle a legacy that had seeped into the very fabric of the society Silas had influenced? Elias, alongside a weary but determined Detective Harris, couldn't arrest an idea. They couldn't lock up a philosophy. Their challenge was to expose it, to understand it, to cut it off at its roots before it could infect another generation. Elias threw himself into this new, abstract war. He studied Silas's writings, his speeches, his recorded conversations, looking for the patterns, the triggers, the methods of manipulation. He sought out those who had been touched by Silas's darkness, not just the victims, but the enablers, the followers, the ones who had chosen to walk his path. He needed to understand the allure, the seduction of his philosophy. He needed to know how to counter it. The climax of this new struggle occurred not in a courtroom or a warehouse, but in a public forum, a think tank dedicated to corporate ethics, where a respected, influential figure was about to receive an award. Elias, having gathered irrefutable evidence, having pieced together the chilling consistency of Silas's methods, exposed the recipient, not as a criminal, but as a carrier of the virus, someone who had adopted and adapted Silas's philosophy of ruthless efficiency, of human capital as a disposable resource. The movement towards the climax was a tense buildup in the public arena, a confrontation that threatened to expose the hidden influence of Silas's legacy in respectable circles. The exposure of the influential figure sent shockwaves through the establishment, forcing a confrontation with the uncomfortable truths about the enduring influence of Silas's methods. And as the influential figure's reputation crumbled, as the public grappled with the revelation that such thinking still existed, hidden in plain sight, Elias felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't enough. It wouldn't stop the others, the ones still operating in the shadows, the ones who hadn't been exposed. But it was a start. It was a crack in the dam. Detective Harris approached Elias, his face grim. "We've exposed one," he said, "but there are others. Silas's legacy is like a virus. It adapts. It mutates. We can't afford to be complacent." The powerful life lesson was that the fight against evil is never-ending, that vigilance is a virtue, and that the responsibility to challenge harmful ideologies falls on everyone.